Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a card inspired by a pillow. I will actually have the image on my blog post. I don't put them in videos just because the last thing I need is someone like claiming that you never know. So it's on my blog post and it was actually for last week's color throwdown challenge and life as usual. But I had this idea kind of mulling over in my head. People ask me that a lot. Like, you know, how do you come up with card ideas? Like, how do you get inspiration? Those sorts of things. All sorts of random things. But the biggest one is I will see something. That's why I like the color throwdown challenge. Because not only is it the colors, but there's an image that inspires the colors. And more often than not, I'll see the image and get ideas. So I'll get to that in a second. So first off, I'd already done a bunch of my die cutting. And then I have, like, I'm going to use a circle die cut as kind of my main piece. And I'm using technically a mask on my card front here. This is an A2 card front. I have the score line there. And this mask is, I just keep it with my circle wafer dies. This is actually just Yupo paper. I would recommend though using like actual masking paper or scrap paper. Yupo, because it's not paper, it's plastic, it's slick. So things like to slide. I knew what I was doing, but still, just listen to my words and not just follow. But the circle is smaller than the die cut that I'm going to be using. So I'm not too worried about perfection, but that's also like using Yupo as a mask or just thicker cardstock as a mask. You're not going to get a good stamped impression very close to that edge. And you'll see here as I lift this stamp, like I've got a gap between the mask and a bit of the stamping. That's fine. That will be covered up. I'm just saying though, if you're wanting to mask things off, that sort of thing, that's where masking paper is really good because it's so thin, you know, and there's less chance of having gaps or that sort of a thing with your stamping. So I'd place that little mask there, and not to actually mask anything. It was just to give me a visual so I could stamp these two, like this swag of leaves and whatnot. This is from Simon's Garden Greetings set that came out in the July 2021 card kit that I never got a chance to do an unboxing for. It sold out. Of course it did. It was a fabulous kit. The set though, and everything's available individually. I'll have a link to it. It's fabulous. So I'd use that little like circle as a guide because I wanted to stamp that, you know, on the top and bottom. And then there's little like dot stamps in the set, and those are perfect. So I used those with, I'd stamp the leaves with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And then those little yellow dots, I used VersaFine Clair CHEERFUL ink, which is online. It looks like a very like dirty yellow, but it's actually just a really pretty bright yellow. I don't use the colors very often. I have all the VersaFine Clair colors. They are fabulous. They are amazing inks. I don't know why I don't reach for them. The Nocturne I use. You guys see it in almost every single video. So anywho, stamp that. I set it aside because those VersaFine Clair inks take longer to dry. So I set that aside and worked on the other elements. So I added some of my favorite black and white stripe pattern paper to that circle. I just glued it, flipped over the circle, used the edges to trim, like as a guide to trim off. And then the sentiment, the die cut sentiment, is Simon's Big Scripty Hugs wafer die that also had come in last month's kit. And I just used the word, not the outline. And I die cut it 3 times from black cardstock. And then I'm going to stack these together just using thin amounts of Craftacular, or somewhat thin. I was pressing a little too hard, so glue oozes out a bit. When that happens, if it's like large amounts like this, I just wipe it off with my fingers, the edge of my fingernail, that sort of thing. A lot of it I don't worry about though, because you can see it right now, but when it dries, you won't be able to see it. It doesn't leave a really glossy finish or anything like that. But I'll just wipe off the excess, like you see with my fingers, etc. More so I don't get it anywhere else, because that happens a lot. So I've got my die cut, and like I said, I had this like mental image. I was like thinking about it at night. That's a lot of times when card ideas come to me, you know, laying in bed, trying to get to sleep. Me and dealing with issues of insomnia means I have a lot of time to think. So card ideas happens a lot. So that's where this kind of came from. I was thinking about that pillow and the image and the gray and the yellow and the black and the white. And this just kind of evolved. So I didn't originally I used the Leafy branch wafer die. That's the more like narrower pointed one. And I loved that with the yellow. but I found it was too much with the 2. So I pulled out my oldie but goodie clustered leaves wafer die, and I die cut that from Simon's Smoke cardstock, and then trimmed it down a little bit with my scissors because it's huge. It's like 6 inches long, something like that. So I'll get back to that in a second. As always, I'm jumping around. I have my card base. I flipped it over and put it inside my Misty so that I could stamp the wreath image from the Garden Greeting set. Again, just such a nice set. I love it. So I stamped that with Simon's Smoke ink, and then I chose one of the sentiments from the set, and I'm going to stamp that with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. So once that's stamped, I'm going to take that my little acrylic block with the 2 little dots, and I'm going to kind of stamp those around the wreath with that same Cheerful ink, just to tie it all together, you know. It's just cute. And the funny thing was, I originally, like, in my head when I was planning this card, I was thinking like yellow splatters. I was like, oh, I'll use yellow paint. This is a way, like, stamps like this, or stamps, you know, because there's stamp sets out there that actually have like splatter stamps, but little dots and things like that. It's a way to add like a controlled form of splatter, because I know some people, they're like, oh, I used to be too. Not so much anymore. You guys have seen me. I'll splatter everything, including myself. Anyway, I just stamped those little dots as a controlled form of splatter. So the inside is done. I'm going to adhere this die cut circle with some of Simon's Big Mama foam tape, so it just pops up a bit. And this is what I meant about I'm not being worried about how I stamped those swags of leaves and how like the center part wasn't stamped properly, etc., because it got covered by the larger die cut circle. And then to adhere my clustered leaves with this one, I just used a little bit of craft tacky glue. This die has been out for years and years. I think I started talking about it in my blog post that I haven't finished typing up. But this is like an oldie but goodie. Like one of the first like larger die sets I remember buying, because it's so big and fabulous. And it's still available. So anyway, I adhered that with the craft tacky glue. And then for this leafy branch, I kept some of the center pieces in it. And I used just thin 3D foam squares and just kind of popped that up here and there with the thin 3D foam squares, rather than fiddling with like a bunch of little tiny bits of adhesive, and then just layered that on top, pressed it into place. And then I had another afterthought. I would have done this before adhering, but I decided it needed it. Rather than having just the hugs word, I wanted to add the word sending. There's a sending hugs stamp in the Garden Greeting set. I cut the hugs off, set it back in the stamp package because I can use it again, butt them up together, it's fine. But I wanted just the sending word. So I inked it up with that cheerful ink and then carefully stamped that onto this finished thing. I wasn't too worried about it because I was like, if I mess it up, I'll heat emboss it on, you know, some cardstock and then like glue it over top. But it worked. It worked. We're good. So I stamped that and then adhered the die cut. So it says sending hugs. And then of course I'm going to add some bling. This was also necessary though. I don't know if you could see it on camera, but there was a couple spots where it kind of smudged the stamping when I first stamped that cluster. So these are being strategically placed. I've said this in a lot of videos to you guys. Bling is bling. You love bling, but it's a good way to cover up like, oops, you got a smear here, or, you know, whatever. Cover it with some bling or die cut, whatever, you know, don't throw away the card. You can usually cover it and make it work. And that's what I did. So adhere those into place, reinforce the fold of my card. And then I paired this with a black envelope and it was good to go. So just a fun little quick sort of video. And like I said, I'll have a link to the color throwdown challenge and the image in my blog post, which will be linked directly below this video. And I'll also link to all the supplies, etc. So you can check that out below if you are interested. And thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, commenting. I very much appreciate it. And I'll see you very soon in the next one. Bye.